Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. A bit of a round trip. I'm sorry it's a flying visit. I've just been up in North Yorkshire to start the public consultation on the dualling of the A66. It's one of the most important projects that we've got on the agenda. I'm sure all of you across the north would agree that not nearly enough attention has been paid over the years to the east-west links. There is not a dual carriageway between the M62 and the motorway between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and that cannot be right. So we're starting the process of the public consultation. It's pretty sensitive. It goes through the Eden Valley, so we're going to have to do this very carefully and plan it very well environmentally. But it's one part of a strategy of delivering much better east-west links. And after that, we've got work to do on the A69. There is a definite challenge there. And of course, with the opening of Carlisle Airport, a real need there. And I'm also very much of the view that we need to improve the links between East Lancashire and West Yorkshire. Many of you will know that I've already started work on the potential to reopen the Skipton to Colne railway line, but actually almost more importantly is improving the road links between the two. And so Highways England have now started work on what would be the first phase of that, how you would do a bypass of Colne. Probably not. Those of you who know the M65 ends up in a supermarket car park. I'm not suggesting that we knock down the supermarket and carry straight on. But Colne definitely needs a bypass, and we need to go beyond that and improve the links across to West Yorkshire. And the reality is the area from Bradford up to the northwest is not really nearly well served enough by transport, and we've got to deal with it. And so these east-west links are a real priority of the strategy as we go forward, and the A66 is the first part of that. And of course, the east-west links are not just about roads, though we do spend an awful lot of time talking about rail, and I think not enough talking about roads because there's a real need for significant improvements to the road network, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But of course, we do need to deal with the east-west rail links as well. And that is why the Transpennine Upgrade is the flagship project of the rail investment programme for what's called Control Period 6, the next 5-year investment programme. Work's just starting now. It is a huge project. It is not just tinkering the edges. This is a reconstruction of this railway line. It's going to be done in phases. It's got to be done over a period of years because of the sheer disruption involved. But you're taking what is now a 2-track railway. I've just travelled across it come down from Darlington across that route. And those of you who know it will know there's plenty of places where it used to be 4-track, plenty where it isn't 4-track, but it needs to be 4-track, particularly at either end where you've got commuter services alongside the fast trains. It involves building new stations. It involves reshaping the line of the existing tracks so you can go up to 4 tracks. It involves flyovers. It's not a project. It's often talked about in terms of electrification. It is a complete reconstruction of a significant part of that line. And we're trying to do it in the most sensitive possible way. It is going to be, I'm afraid, very disruptive. There will be extended periods where the line has to be partially closed for work, and trains will have to be diverted around that work. But it is absolutely essential to delivering, in the shorter term, a proper upgrade to the railway line between Manchester and Leeds and York. We've already upgraded the route between Liverpool and Manchester, as many will know, but it's really essential that this project, I think, delivers improvement for the north. And the other big project in the north over that period is the upgrade to the East Coast Main Line, which is going to significantly reduce journey times from Leeds, from Newcastle, and from Scotland. Of course, that's not the only thing happening. I'm really pleased that we have finally completed the work on the railway line from Blackpool to Manchester. The failure of that project to deliver on time was the principal reason for the timetable problems last year. It is now finished, thank goodness. And I think it makes a real difference. I was being asked the other day, I was talking to the Lancashire Evening Telegraph about what are we doing for transport in Lancashire. Quite apart from commuting into Manchester, I think really modernising that link from Blackpool across to Preston down to Wigan makes a real difference to Lancashire as well. And of course, underlying that on the railways, and again, taken a bit longer than I would wish, but every single train in the north on the Transpennine franchise and on the Northern franchise is being replaced with either a completely refurbished train. They're already in operation around the other. I was on one of those on the West Cumbria line recently, and the passengers there are thrilled because they're a significant improvement on what was there before. And you will have seen the new CAF trains around already. They're coming into service in the next few weeks, slightly delayed because they've had a problem with the couplings, but they'll be coming into service and be replacing all the Pacer trains, which are finally going to go to the scrapyard. They're nice new trains. I went in one in Liverpool Lime Street recently. I think passengers who go in them will see a completely different travel experience. So I think all of that is a significant positive. And then there's individual projects that are happening. We're really pleased that in the next few days we're going to see the opening of the Halton Curve, which will make a real difference to passengers travelling in and out of Liverpool. But of course there are challenges. And probably the biggest challenge that within this city is how we deal with the congestion around the Oxford Road corridor. And that's something we're working on very actively at the moment with Network Rail and with Andy Burnham. I have suggested to Andy Burnham, and we're doing work, that we might try and actually take some of the services that are there at the moment and get them onto a tram train network of the kind that is used by many cities in Germany, I think can unlock capacity on the rail corridors through Manchester and create more opportunity to expand the Metrolink network. And that's, I think, the other part. I talk quite a lot about what we're doing outside the big cities, because it's very easy for the Northern Powerhouse just to be a tale about Liverpool and Manchester and Leeds and Newcastle and Hull. And of course, the economy of the North is much, much broader than that. And that's why, for example, we are investing in the A595 in West Cumbria to improve the links down to Sellafield. It's why the A66 is really important. But it's also the case that we've got to do a better job around the cities. And I think expanding the Metrolink network here in Manchester to encompass a tram train is a really good opportunity. I'm keen to see the Merseyrail network expand, and I've offered the Mayor of Merseyside the opportunity to take over the infrastructure there as well. We are paying for new trains on the Nexus network up in Newcastle upon Tyne on the Metro there. And one of the most exciting projects around, those of you who followed what I've said over the last 2 or 3 years knows I'm very keen to see many routes that disappeared reopening. And there's a number of places in the country where we're looking at old freight routes with a view to getting trains back on them in the early 2020s. One of those is the Blythe to Ashington line up north of Newcastle. Those of you who know that part of the northeast will know that it's not as good economically as it could be north of Newcastle. And I think having a proper commuter railway down from some of those towns on the coast into the centre of Newcastle would be a real generator of growth. And that's something that, therefore, I'm very keen and I'm expecting a bid from them shortly. And there is money to pay for the reopening of that railway line. And that money is coming through the Transforming Cities Fund, which I think is going to be a real driver of transport change in all the cities of the north. Here in Manchester, it's funding the green transport networks that you're seeing emerge, not just the expansion of the Metrolink, but actually the emergence of all the cycle routes. I think in Newcastle it will be the money that opens or pays for the reopening of the Blythe to Ashington railway line. We're now looking at West Yorkshire about what the best projects are there. There's been a big block of money going to Leeds, nearly £200 million going to Leeds for urban transport improvements. They're doing it for things like bus routes. But I'm also keen that the Transforming Cities funds, given that West Yorkshire is a combined authority area, gets resource into some of the other centres, into Bradford, into Huddersfield, because, as I say, it can't just be about the big cities, it's got to be about the other centres as well. And then I guess also, I talked a bit about disruption on the railways when we do the Transpennine upgrade, but you will also have seen that we're putting a big investment into the motorway network. Those of you who know me know that I used to live down in Cheshire, and I remember for years and years and years, my family used to live quite close to the M6, talk about, are we going to build an extra lane or whatever, is anything going to happen finally? Well, the project that's just been completed, the smart motorway on the M6, is the biggest investment project in that motorway since it was opened. And those of you who use it, having put up with the roadworks for years, I hope you appreciate it has actually made a difference. And we're now doing improvements on the other motorways. There's already been roadworks around Manchester, as you know. And we have, in fact, delayed a couple of those projects to give everybody a bit of breathing space between roadworks, in consultation, I have to say, with local city leaders, because that's the right thing to do. But there is a big continuing investment programme due on the motorways as well to spread the expansion of capacity through the Smart Motorways network. So the impression I want you to go away with, there's not always a lot to talk about, nobody's doing anything for transport in the north. We're actually doing an awful lot. We're doing things that should have happened a long time ago and didn't, but you can't do everything at once. And we've got, I hope, a sensible programme going forward of upgrades that are at a pace that delivers change, but also at a pace that is livable with, because you can't just bring the economy of the North to a grinding halt by doing too much, and you never have enough money to do everything in one go anyway. But of course, that leads us to the two big flagship projects that are coming down the track: Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2. HS2, much in the news, because there are a lot of people, many of them further south, who don't want it. I think that HS2 is an essential part of expanding the capacity of our rail network and our transport system as a whole. It will carry the equivalent of 2 motorways worth of people. I don't think people quite understand that. It is a capacity project. If I have a regret, I almost wish it had never been called HS2, High Speed 2, because although, yes, it's a fast railway line, and if you're going to build a brand new railway line, why wouldn't you build a fast one? It's actually about capacity. And if you live in suburban South Manchester, if you live in commuter belt Cheshire, you know that there aren't enough services from places like Northwich and Knutsford. But you only get those services if you can find extra capacity. And Piccadilly is pretty full at the moment. And the benefit of taking the express trains off the existing network and putting them onto a new railway line is suddenly you create lots more opportunity for commuter trains in the morning rush hour of the kind that Manchester needs. And the same is true in Leeds, the same is true in Birmingham, and actually the same is true in North London as well. So the government firmly believes this is a necessary project. There's all kinds of stories about it, but they're just getting on with the work at the moment. And the work on the first leg's already started. If you go to the centre of Birmingham, you'll see all the groundworks being done for the new Birmingham station and where the route will go. And as far as I'm concerned, that work continues. And also, you know that it is an essential stepping stone to Northern Powerhouse Rail as well, because certainly the two will be joined umbilically. The links from into Manchester Piccadilly will run Northern Powerhouse Rail trains and HS2 trains. HS2 trains will pass and stop at Manchester Airport, so will Northern Powerhouse Rail trains. But the Northern Powerhouse Rail trains will go to Liverpool, they'll go to Leeds, and they'll go up to the northeast and across to Hull and down to Sheffield. It's a clear commitment from the government, it's a manifesto commitment, it's very necessary, and we're now working through with Transport for the North, who've submitted their proposals for it. There's some decisions to take. I'm personally very strongly in favour of ensuring that Bradford is a part of the Northern Powerhouse rail network, but that work is continuing. But these aren't projects that happen quickly, they're not projects that open in the short term, and that is why things like the Transpennine upgrade are so important, why the A66 is so important, why the Smart Motorways programme is so important, and some of the smaller local projects are so important. So I'd want you to go away with the impression that we are very determined to change a tide of non-investment in transport for the North, and are doing so now on the projects you can see happening, either because you sit in the traffic jams or you travel on the open bit of road. And last year, for example, we opened the last bit of motorway grade road between London and Newcastle in North Yorkshire. How on earth did we not have a motorway grade road from London to Newcastle decades ago? But we didn't. It's been done. It's there. You can travel on it. And there will be more and more of that as time goes by. We've got projects about to start in Hull, projects on the A19. In fact, we just opened a new bit of improvement on the A19, another one close to follow, on the A1, north of Newcastle, etc., etc. And of course, from here, many of you will know the Heysham Relief Road, the Heysham Link Road, which I think has made a real difference to the economy of that part of North Lancashire. So, a lot done, much more to do, strong commitment to delivering a better transport system. Bear with us, it can't happen overnight. It takes a long time to plan, a long time to deliver, but the intent is clearly there. Thank you.
I'm going to take a seat because I can. When I saw you speak in Manchester a couple of months ago, you said that it was going to get worse before it got better in terms of disruption because of transport works. Is that still your message?
Well, I mean, it is not possible to deliver an improvement without some disruption, and my anxiety about the Transpennine Rail upgrade is, I've said to Network Rail, you need to get on with it, you need to deliver it, but you need to try and make sure you do it in a way that does not make the job of travelling from Leeds to Manchester impossible for several years. So it does mean that some trains will take longer to get there. But equally, it's really important to do it. Likewise on the motorways, and we agreed with Andy Burnham and the City Council and others that actually we would have a pause on the Smart Motorways programme, simply because so many people have been sitting in traffic jams for so long that it's right and fair to give them a bit of breather before it carries on. But if we're going to complete the Smart Motorways programme around Manchester, and we talk about the M62, the M56 and the M60 still, then we are going to have more roadworks in the future, but we're trying to give you a breather first.
Thank you. Does anyone have a question for Chris into a microphone? Yes, we've got a gentleman with his hand up here. Microphone just coming to you, and then I will come to you in a minute.
Thank you. Tony Fradley, Electrification Design House. My question, Chris, is CO2 emissions have come very high up in the agenda, but you've not mentioned it at all in your presentation, so I'm wondering what your feelings are about it.
So yes, I should have talked a bit more about that. I mean, it's a national picture rather than a northern one, but the number one priority is to green the car fleet on the roads and the vehicle fleet on the roads. We've made progress. We are seeing steady pickup of electric vehicles, not fast enough. One of the things that we need to do is to get more charging points, and I think particularly more charging points into residential areas. I drive a plug-in hybrid. I charge it at home, and you can, if you've got one, put in a charging point at home relatively straightforwardly. We provide a grant to do that. But if you are parking in the street outside your house, we need local authorities to get really engaged in building on-street charging networks in residential areas. We've again got grants available for that. There are only 2 local authorities in the north that have bid for those grants so far, none in the northwest. So any of you from local authorities, please come forward. This is money that's there to help start to do the kind of things you're seeing in places like Portsmouth, where they are using lampposts as the electricity base for charging points. On the railways, it's going to be a combination of different modes. We're going to see battery electric, we're going to see diesel electric, we're going to see hydrogen. We're going to be trialling properly the first hydrogen trains on the UK network in the next couple of years. We're going to see battery electric hybrids on the Lakes line. And then in buses, the move towards electric buses already started. I went to Harrogate bus station recently, where they've got a fleet of electric buses locally that charge as they sit in the bus station. They've got kind of overhead pantograph. They're going to put their connectors up. They charge while they're waiting off. They go around again, and then come back and charge while they're waiting for passengers again. We're going to need more of that as well.
I'll just ask a question from Slido, and then I'll come to the question waiting there. So how do you explain the continued gap in infrastructure spending between North and South, including TfL, which was excluded in response to post-IPPR figures?
Well, so the difference, if you take central government spending per head on transport is higher in the North today than it is in the South. The thing that distorts the figures is London taxes. So part of the cost, if you take Crossrail, for example, half of it's being funded, in fact more than half now, through taxation raised on businesses in London by the Mayor of London. So if you count that as public spending, then that's what distorts the figures. Now, my own view is that the ability of business in London, particularly given the value of real estate, the ability to put in place higher rates, is much greater than it is in many parts of the North. And so I have never argued that we should try and replicate the same kind of expectation in the North that we have in London about them paying up half of big projects. But if you're taking pure government spending, the stuff that comes from my department, from communities and local government, and through other routes, actually at the moment, spending per head is higher in the North than the South.
Thank you. Can you put your hand up? We had a question here. Can we get a microphone? Thank you.
My name is David Frankel. I travel to and from Manchester Piccadilly Station. We were due to receive 2 new platforms, 15 and 16, as part of the plan to widen the Castlefield corridor. This was itself an integral part of the Northern Hub, but you've cancelled that scheme, or you've delayed it indefinitely, which, as a direct result of that, we've seen the deterioration of rail services through Manchester. We've seen sustained disruption. We've seen Manchester become a bottleneck, a real performance liability for train services across the whole of the north of England. So, enough of this tram train rubbish. When are you going to get your head out of the sand and fund the rail improvements that Manchester needs?
Well, I haven't cancelled any schemes in Manchester at the moment. Everyone involved is trying to work out what the best thing is to do about that corridor. The original estimates of cost were way out of kilter. the potential disruption that that project would cause to rail travel through the centre of Manchester is judged by everyone to be enormous. And I'm trying to work out, together with Network Rail, together with Transport for the North, what is the best way of dealing with the problems in that corridor. It's absolutely fundamental. I'm well aware of it. But we don't yet have a simple, quick, non-disruptive solution to it. There are some things we may be able to do. I mean, there are trains that go through there, for example, that are absolutely packed and very short. One of the options we're looking at is, can we ease some of the pressures? It takes a long time to get people on and off trains just because the trains aren't big enough. So that may be a short-term measure that we can take. It's not a question of head in the sand. I do not have a simple solution that is going to deliver quick change on that corridor. And if you go for the full McCoy, it's going to mean years, and I mean years and years and years of disruption in Manchester that I don't want either. So we're trying to find a way of delivering that improvement without causing that kind of disruption.
Another one here. So how can local road infrastructure be funded to unlock residential and commercial development as local government expect the developer to pay, which is unrealistic?
Well, I think it's a combination of the two. The reason that we've got a £5 billion housing infrastructure fund is because we recognise developers can't pay for everything. But equally, developers turn agricultural land worth not a reasonable amount into residential land worth an awful lot. And in the midst of it, the landowners make a substantial profit. So what we want to see is where we can deliver it, developers and landowners making a contribution to the cost of the infrastructure that unlocks the value of that land. And I think that's only sensible. We do it through some of the existing systems like Sections 106, but we're also looking at ways of making sure that we can extract as much value as we can from the development land uplift, whilst at the same time investing a very large amount of money in schemes that will actually unlock land for housing, because we need to unlock land for housing.
There's been a feeling this afternoon and also on Slido that central government and yourself don't really care about cycling. That's quite low down on your list of priorities. Is that correct?
Well, I can assure you with Jessie Norman, my deputy, as the cycling minister, who cycles everywhere, there is no possibility of cycling not getting due attention in my department. And if you look at what's happening in Manchester, that's being paid for out of the Transforming Cities Fund, and one of the reasons for putting that money in was to unlock schemes that within the city that made transport much easier, and one part of that is being used in Manchester and in elsewhere to build cycle networks. So I would say we're putting more money than any previous government has in helping cycle networks develop, and there will be more in the future. Mm-hmm.
The Minister has to head off shortly, so does anyone else have any more questions into a microphone? No, that's fine. So how can government be trusted to deliver devolution or sufficient funding for Transport for the North visions when decisions over other issues, for instance, ferries, have been so farcical?
Well, I completely disagree with your latter point. We have spent, I think rightly, a very large amount of money, £4 billion, on making sure that the UK is equipped for a no-deal Brexit, even though I very much hope that doesn't happen. You would not expect the government to let us be in a position where we were unable to guarantee the flow of drugs into the country in the event of a no-deal Brexit, and that's what we've done.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Chris Grayling.